I wanted to talk about a discovery that I made this weekend, something I didn't understand before, but means something now. Okay. And basically, I have 3 images here that I've stitched out on my Husqvarna embroidery machine, and they have exactly the same number of stitches, even though, if you can see here, they're quite different in size. And that is how, when you use software, so I basically shrunk these, I used resize, but that's why they always warn you, be careful when you use resize about the density. Now the reason is because these images that I've stitched out here have exactly the same number of stitches. So you've compressed the same number of stitches into a completely different size. So when you get to the smallest here, and this is something I could understand, the back becomes, it's see if there's a good way to show you how bad this is on the back there. You can see how much is sticking up. This is what I learned this weekend. I could never understand what was going on before and why I kept having this when I was resizing things. But it makes sense. So let me explain this a little more. If you imagine, let's see, zoom in on here. There are 3 stitches. I can take the same 3 stitches and shrink them in length, ultimately going towards the dot in the center. So you can only go so far till those 3 stitches, even though you've shrunken them, end up on top of each other. So you haven't reduced the number. What you said is stitch 3 really, really short stitches. Okay? So if you think about it, here we have 3 images, same number of stitches. And what I've said is fit whatever you've got on there into there. Okay? Which is why you end up with the mess. So what you have to do there is say, well, okay, once you get to a certain point, what you have to do is say, okay, what I need to do is remove 3 stitches, reduce the number of stitches so the density is less. Because if you think about it, you've got 3 stitches there, and you go all the way to the bottom. Why would 1 not suffice there? Because that's really essentially what you're saying. So that's the difference between density and size. Size says, sew the number of stitches, and it's easy to increase the number. The length of your stitch, so starting from a small, it's easy to make it bigger. There are always limits, because eventually when you get to embroider, if you had stitches that long, that wouldn't work very well. But when you're reducing, eventually you say, well, once I get to this point, really 2 would be better, and when you get down to there, 1 would be better. That's your stitch density. How many stitches do I make within a certain space? So what I realized is that once I was working with this, why I should have, and now I understand why you have to go in and say, okay, right, I have now reduced this by half the size, but I need to reduce the number of stitches in there and reduce the stitch density so it doesn't end up really stiff and lumpy. So it was okay here, but once I got here, it got very lumpy. So if I went for any smaller, which is what I'm doing, then I have to really reduce the number of stitches to achieve a better result. And that is what I learned about stitch density and why the sizing can make a mess when you're actually stitching it out.